Thank you.
I hit it. We're good.
Okay. All right. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar for enrollment guidelines for F1 students for fall 2022. Those of you who have been enrolled with us for a while know that starting in March of 2020 and the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, rules for international students changed dramatically based on what the schools were willing to certify to the Department of Homeland Security. They alleviated some of the enrollment requirements to allow for more online courses to be taken and students to actually be enrolled from outside the US, and some other things that we are going to discuss. Now, the rules are established by the Department of Homeland Security Student Exchange Visitor Program, or SEVP, and they have officially announced that their guidance and relief will remain in place for the 22-23 academic year, but that's provided the university that you attend, and for all of you, that's the University of Cincinnati, is remaining in COVID exemptions as well. And up until now, the university has offered many contingencies for COVID, from being online fully for a time period to being hybrid to offering more online courses and hybrid courses. But beginning this fall semester, fall 2022, we will officially be reporting to Homeland Security that we are back to normal pre-pandemic operations. And you need to understand what that means for your enrollment. So the first thing is SEVP guidelines requires any F1 student or prior to our going back to the old regulations, the relief allowed you to be in any combination of courses, even online, once you completed your first semester. It allowed you to keep your F1 record active, even if you were enrolled online from outside the country, and it allowed you to continue to accumulate time towards meeting requirements for CPT and OPT. But beginning this fall, those requirements will no longer be in effect. And so basically we're back to the rules that were in place before the pandemic started. And for an F1 student, that means you have to be enrolled full time. For undergraduate students, that means you have to be enrolled at least 12 credit hours. And for graduate students, that means at least 10 credit hours. And to reach the full-time enrollment requirement, you can only use 3 credit hours of online courses. So this would mean an undergraduate student, for example, would need to be enrolled for at least 9 credit hours of face-to-face courses, and graduate students at least 7 credit hours of face-to-face courses. And you could then use 1 3 credit hour online course to reach your full-time enrollment threshold. And that is what you have to do again beginning this fall. Now, once full-time enrollment has been reached, additional online courses can certainly be taken. So for example, an undergraduate student could take 9 credit hours of in-person courses and 6 to 9 credit hours of online courses if you wanted. A graduate student could take 7 hours of in-person courses and as many as 11 online credit hours if you wanted. But the point is to reach your full-time enrollment threshold, 12 credit hours for undergrads, 10 credit hours for graduates. Only 3 of those credit hours can be online. So you got to make sure that you're enrolled properly. And a big change is students can no longer enroll and remain outside the US and keep their SEVIS records active unless you are on an officially approved UC study abroad program, which would include co-ops and practicums. Anything else, you just decide you're going to take online courses from abroad and your program can offer them, your F1 record can no longer remain active. Now, what that means is you have to understand what your courses that you're registering for in Catalyst mean and say. So we have 4 designations for our courses in Catalyst. P is for fully in person. DL is for fully online. And then we also have 2 hybrid options. PD is for partial distance learning and MD is for mostly distance learning. Any fully in-person class or a partially online class, P or PD, are considered in person, but DL and MD courses are considered online. So you need to make sure that you understand the courses that you're registering for so that you're getting that proper mix of in-person versus online courses when you register. Now, there's some key courses that students, depending on what your program is or what your degree level is, that sometimes get a little confusing. So let's go over a couple of those. First, graduate students, master's and doctoral students who are completed with all required coursework and you're writing your thesis or dissertation only. Typically, those students are enrolled for 1 credit hour of thesis or dissertation research. That course is considered to be in person. If you're in a co-op program or you have a program that requires capstones, practicums, or other experiential learning courses, those courses are also in-person courses. And so keep that in mind if you fall into any one of those groups. A big group of students that we want to make sure we reach are those who have been studying outside the US who now will want to return to keep your F1 record active. So the first thing being, we know that there are students out there that have spent the whole last 2 years enrolled online from outside the US, and we've kept your F1 record valid. Starting this fall, we can no longer do that. And so that means you need to prepare for your return if you want to keep your current F1 record active. And to return, you have to make sure, number one, that your F1 visa stamp is still valid. So check your passport and your visa stamp. And if it's not, then you need to make sure you hopefully can get an appointment before classes begin for a visa. Many embassies and visas are still not operating at full capacity, and you may have difficulty doing that. You'll have to check with the embassy. You also need to make sure that your I-20 is signed on page 2 within 12 months of the date you wish to re-enter the US. If you're on practical training, that's 6 months from the date of the last signature. If you don't have a signature on your I-20 for travel and re-entry, you need to go to our iBearcats global system and submit the travel signature request e-form. It's found under the F1 student services menu. So you need all of those things to re-enter from an immigration perspective. You also need to understand that the US requires everybody entering to be fully vaccinated for COVID-19 in order to return, unless you fall under one of the medical exemptions or other exemptions. So if you're from a country where one of the vaccines isn't prevalent, 10% or less of the residents have been able to get the vaccine, you would be able to get an exemption to re-enter based on that. And then you'd have to make arrangements to get vaccinated after you enter. But most of you will need to be fully vaccinated for COVID-19 by an FDA approved or World Health Organization authorized vaccine. So here in the US, our 3 primary vaccines are Pfizer, Moderna, and Janssen or Johnson & Johnson. But around the world, AstraZeneca, Covaxin, Covishield, Sinovac, and Sinopharm are also acceptable. Make sure that you are fully vaccinated before you try to return. Now, if any of you on the line are on optional practical training, under normal circumstances, students on post-completion or STEM OPT must be working at least 20 hours per week to maintain valid OPT status. For the duration of the COVID-19 pandemic, SEVP considers students who are working less than 20 hours a week to be maintaining their status. In addition, if you're on the 12-month OPT period, volunteer activities can count towards any employment you want to declare. But if you're on the STEM OPT extension, volunteer activities are not acceptable. But the point is, if you're on OPT right now and you're not working the full 20 hours a week or more, you will still be able to remain active on OPT. UC's return to normal operations does not affect OPT, and the fact that SEVP has said for 22-23 academic year, we consider the pandemic to still be in operation. That would mean you are allowed to continue on OPT as long as you're working in any capacity for any number of hours, not just 20 or more. So if there are those of you on the line on OPT, that's how this will affect you. Are going back to normal pre-pandemic operations doesn't affect those who have graduated and are on OPT. So keep that in mind. Now, that's the basic facts that everybody needs to know about. And again, to recap, that means you've got to be back to an in-person program of study this fall, and that if you want to keep your F1 record valid, you can't be overseas any longer. You have to return. And so what I'll do now is I'll ask Sarah O'Connell from my staff to jump in and try to summarize any of the questions we've gotten in chat that need to be answered. So Sarah, you want to jump in?
Sure. We didn't have too many questions because it was such a great presentation. It covered a lot of what students needed to know, but some questions that I hadn't had a chance to get to since they just came in towards the end here. What about kids under 10 years? Do they have to be vaccinated to enter the US?
Minors do not have to be vaccinated to enter the US.
All right, next question. Is a soft copy of the vaccine card or QR coded copy acceptable during entry? I recently lost my vaccine card.
As long as you can show, you don't have to have the actual card, a photo, on your phone of it, provided they can make out the provider for the vaccine, the dates that you've had them, as long as all of that's clear on a phone shot, they will accept that.
Great. A good question. Are digital signatures on your F1 I-20 still valid?
Yes, they are.
Let's see. How long can I be outside of the States to keep F1 visa active?
Well, we're back to pre-pandemic rules now. And so what that means for if you are outside for the fall semester, you have to be in the US fall semester. If you're not, so classes begin on 8/22. You need to be here 8/22. And if you're not, then we have to terminate your F1 record. Now, that doesn't mean you can't take online courses. That only means your F1 record can't remain active. And so you got to keep that in mind. This is only about your F1 status and keeping it active. If you wanted to, you could certainly remain where you're at, take all online courses if your program can offer it, and continue to accumulate credits towards graduation. But your F1 record will not be able to remain active in that case.
Great. Will the process of receiving a new I-20 change? I'm assuming maybe they're asking again, are we going to continue to issue electronic I-20s, or is that regulation changed with these updates?
The electronic regulation for I-20s has not changed. Electronic I-20s can still be issued and will be issued moving forward.
Great. A student who is going to be on a reduced course load, anything special with these new regulations they need to be aware of?
Nope, it's the normal regulations for that. That means you have to be first authorized for the reduced course load by our office, and you have to be registered for, what the reduced course load was authorized for. If you're a graduate student done with all required coursework, that means 1 credit hour of thesis dissertation research. If you're in your last semester of study, it means the number of courses necessary to complete the program. Again, knowing that they now have to be in person and not online courses.
Great. So a question about what does fully vaccinated mean? 2 doses, or do I need a booster?
You do not need a booster. It means whatever the appropriate dosage is. And for at least 2 of those offered here in the US, that means 2 doses. The Johnson & Johnson one only requires 1. You do not have to be boosted to be considered fully vaccinated.
Great. And I will put a link back in the chat again to the CDC website, which has more information on all of that, as well as what you need to show to enter.
That is correct. Yes.
All right. Can I arrive a week or 2 late into the US?
Well, you should be here by the start of classes. Your ability to arrive late will ultimately be determined by your program and your professors. If you're supposed to be in classes on the 22nd, if you're missing classes, how are you going to make up that work, and will they allow it? Certainly a good rule of thumb that we like to communicate to departments and students is nobody should be arriving more than a week late. If you miss more than a week of classes, there's no way you're going to be able to successfully complete the term. You should be trying to arrive back by the 22nd. If for some reason you can't and you need permission to arrive late, you need to let your professors know and see if they clear it, and go from there.
Great. We've got a couple of questions coming in that are pretty unique to individual circumstances. So I'm going to type in our international student account. So if I skip your question, it probably means it's a little too specific for us to answer in this webinar, but send us an email and we'll be happy to help. Let's see. So if we go back home in December and return in January, does that affect our F1 status? So basically, travel over winter break. Anything different with that or concerns about that?
No, not at the moment. I mean, travel has been wide open for over a year now. And, you should obviously know when spring semester starts and be back on time. But again, when you come back for spring, you need to be coming back for an in-person full course of study.
Great. All right, scrolling through here. I'm in my 6th year and registered for 1 dissertation credit. I got an approval for the reduced course load last year. Do I need to submit that request again?
No, you do not.
Let's see. Do I need to apply for a new I-20 as my current I-20 says as per SEVP guidelines? However, I have a co-op in fall 2022, and then in December, I'm going to India for 20 days. That might be a little more specific. It's okay if your I-20 says that per SEVP guidelines, that's what all of the I-20s are saying to show that it's okay, that it's electronic. But a reminder, you do need to print those I-20s. You have to have a hard copy, sign it when you re-enter.
And print it in color so the
Yep.
blue signature from our office shows up.
So if my F1 is not valid, so maybe they are going to decide to stay home and let their F1 record get terminated, can they still complete the program by taking courses online from their home country?
That again, if the program has the courses you need to do that, absolutely you're allowed to do that. But if that's what's going to happen, you need to send our office an email so we know for sure, so we can terminate the F1 record.
Great. Checking our 2 most recent questions. So I think most of the rest are pretty specific. So I'm going to retype instructions in the chat about how to contact an advisor with our office so that we can look at your record, make sure we give you the best advice possible to your unique scenario. But I think that covers us for the questions in the chat.
Okay, great. Well, we appreciate everybody who tuned in this morning to get these answers. The big thing is just know what you're registering for and make sure you're back to a fully in-person course of study this fall. If you're currently outside the US, start making accommodations to get back in the US by the time classes start. If you wish to keep your F1 record active, and any other questions you have along the way, certainly email us directly at the link that we're providing in the chat, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. We hope everybody has remained healthy and safe during this pandemic and continue to do so. And we look forward to seeing you back on campus in person for sure this fall. So thank you for coming.